Hi, Peter. Okay, now I can hear you.
How you doing?
I am so good. And yourself?
I'm great. Yeah, really well.
I just can't see you,
Hmm.
but can you see me?
Yeah, yeah, I can see you fine.
Okay, perfect.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay. This is, I haven't done a live since Instagram has like done their last like five updates. So I haven't done this in like a year's time. So you have to
Oh.
excuse my troubleshooting is going to go a little bit sideways every now and again when I'm trying to figure out how the new update works. Um, yeah, I am a 60-year-old at heart with technology. So,
Same. I'm
yeah,
like sitting here trying to balance my phone in like a chocolate box to have a video and it's
yeah.
ridiculous.
So, I know it's really, really early where you are. It's 7 p.m. here, but you are about a couple, like 10 hours behind.
Yeah, we're nine, I think.
Yeah, 9
Yeah,
a.m. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's
goodness.
we're finally like we have a similar climate to you guys in South Africa here in San Francisco. So it's like just getting into the dark and rainy and like cold winter now.
Wow, yeah. And I know that a lot of people are like, we will never spend time in the US or in the Northern Hemisphere. I know a lot of South Africans that say that they will never go to the Northern Hemisphere for winter because we fear the cold.
Mm.
Absolutely terrible. But I think, San Francisco is not that bad. So,
No, San Francisco's all good. I was just in
yeah.
Colorado for Christmas visiting my sister and it was like 20 degrees. So it was below 0 Celsius for a few days and that was like it was brutal. I'm not used to that anymore.
Oh, wow. No, I don't think that that would be something that I could, ever deal with for now. But I've already chatted to you about this, but soon I'll be seeing the beauty of California when I go and meet
Awesome.
up and chat to some people. Yeah, bringing South
Yeah.
Africa to the US.
Yeah, well, we definitely got to link up when you're here. It's a beautiful state and like I was so surprised when I was in South Africa how similar like the climate and topography is. Like when I drove Chapman's Peak and I just like I felt like I was in Big Sur the whole time. It was just incredible. So yeah, when you're making the trip plans, let me know and I'll send you to a lot of places that'll make you feel like you're home.
Yeah, 100%. I'd love that. But yeah, no, a couple of people have joined now, and a lot of people have been very curious about your launch because I know that the way South Africans heard of Culture Wine Co.'s launch was, via all the other winemakers' Instagram. So a lot of people kind of want to know what's happening over in California because, South Africans really fight tooth and nail to get into the US market. So to just find some guy that's randomly importing a whole bunch of these really cool independent producers, and they are producers that we know and love. To know that we can go to the US and find those wines now, it's everyone's really curious. So you've got about 12 questions that people have like popped through, but we're not going to get through all of them because I've got some like questions of my own. But
Okay.
yeah, let's just like start up with your discovery of South African wine. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it was on a trip there. I've been in the wine industry since for 15 years now, and I have been a buyer on both the East Coast and the West Coast, restaurants, retail shops. And like before I came to South Africa, I could count on one hand how many times a sales rep had come into my establishment trying to sell South African wine. And it's just like so wildly underrepresented here.
Hmm.
Even though there's some great wines that do make it to the States, they're often with a distributor who has such a large portfolio that South African wine was kind of like secondary, third, or fourth kind of tier for them. And so when I went there, I was so blown away and inspired by what's happening and just realized that there needed to be more people telling the story. And I think the stars kind of aligned because I was very ready to start my own business. I always wanted to work on importing. I thought it would be with Italian wine, to be honest, because I lived there, I cooked there, I made wine there. Um, but there's a lot of Italian wine importers here in the US and in California. And I, I realized that with South African wine, what I really love about it is there feels like to be this little bit of an underdog story. And I love that element of life. I always support the underdog. I root for the underdog in sports. And so I was like, you know what? I want to really like be committed to this community, learn more about it, share those stories, and bring these wines in and try to like just change people's mindsets, because I think there's so little understanding of what's happening there that it's a matter of like education and building a foundation. And then I think people, especially buyers in the restaurant and the retail world, are like, whoa, this is kind of blowing my mind. I didn't realize the quality that's happening. And they're, you're starting to see like them getting more interested, and it's been quite amazing.
Hmm. Now, definitely. I mean, I feel like that's how a lot of people's interest in South African wine comes from, actually physically tasting it. It's never have I ever heard a story where someone's just like, I enjoyed South African wine because I heard so much about it. It's usually just like, oh, somebody offered it to me. I don't think anyone ever physically or actively goes out looking for South African wine, which is both a good and bad thing. It keeps it to ourselves. It's almost like a little secret that we have. Because if the demand goes up, then quality tends to take a dip. But, to access the US market means that you have, yeah, it's quite a lot of you guys on one on one continent. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
huge. I mean, I think like, I'm in California, I'm wholesaling here, and then I also retail on my website to 44 states. The
wow.
reason I can't do all is because we have like a very archaic, ridiculous alcohol rules here in the US. Um, and so it's essentially like working with 50 different countries. But California is like the largest consumer in the country by like two times the next biggest state. So California alone could probably eat up what's being produced in South Africa. And so I think for me, it's like it's great to kind of focus on one market and work in San Francisco, work in LA, work in San Luis Obispo, work in these like Tahoe, these amazing places that I think it's good to start small. And I think that's kind of been part of why South African wine hasn't really like broken into the US market in a major way. It's because I think some of the producers end up with distributors that want to be national. And so you're
Hmm.
getting like 3 cases of wine to one state and 5 to another. And it doesn't help to really build in any market because it's such a small amount making it to one. So I'm like, I think that we have the potential here in California to be super focused and allow this state to be like a pioneer for growing the notoriety in the country for South African wines.
Oh, that's actually amazing. Because I mean, if you think about supply and demand, technically we don't have the volume that the US, if you have to look at the US's volume, particularly that entire, Californian region, that California produces quite a lot of wine, like in comparison to places in South Africa. So although we are
Yeah.
considered mass producing, California is also quite up there with their not really bulk wine, but it's bulk quality wine, which is great. And I mean, we don't even compare close to places like Australia and New Zealand. And so we don't really have the supply for the demand of the entire country anyway. So for us to just slowly build to that, it's quite a great idea. And I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like what I'm a little bit afraid of because I'm already seeing such amazing interest in the
mhm.
wines. I've only had my first shipment arrive here 2 months ago. So while I've been working on getting the business off the ground the entire year, from like planning, getting producers on board to licensing to the label regulations, which is wild between SAWIS and the TTB here. Um, Getting all of that started to finally getting the wine here, I've only had bottles in California for 2 months. So I've been just getting the bottles into sommeliers' hands, consumers' hands, and the reception has been amazing. But I'm already seeing like the writing on the wall that if I become popular, like really popular, I'm not going to have enough wine. So it's like, it's a great problem to have. But, you know, working with these small producers, I'm like, oh man, what's probably 3 to 6 months out of the year, I'm going to be out of some of my favorite wines. And that's like, I think it's awesome, but it's also hard to like keep traction when that happens. So that's the good and the bad about working with small producers, is trying to balance out like the year's worth of need.
Yeah, you know, that's definitely. I mean, the problem with small independent producers, and I mean, I I've worked a lot with them in both in production and also, you know, in marketing. It's really tough to actually keep the entire year going, and that's when you start cracking open the vault to sell the older vintages,
Yeah.
and that's why we keep so many of it behind so that we can actually have something to sell for the rest of the year. But you know, it's great when something sells out, but then it's terrible when, you know, we work in an industry where everything is dependent on the season. We don't really have jobs that allow us to have abundance, unfortunately. And yeah, I mean, both from importing, like you are in production, people in marketing, everyone has the same issue with this, is that wine is unfortunately just it's a seasonal thing. And good wine, unfortunately and fortunately, goes really fast. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think another thing, like here in the US, you know, we have Amazon and we have these businesses that, you know, get you orders here. You buy something and it can arrive to you in the same day from an e-commerce site. So I think like Americans have gotten way far too accustomed to like immediacy, and working with small producers doesn't allow that. And I think that's like the beauty of working with them, is that it's kind of taking it back a few steps and like, guys, we don't need to have things so readily available to us at the drop of a hat, you know? And I think I think a lot of people in our age group and younger are kind of starting to like take a step back from that and say, how do we buy small, like support small businesses instead of, you know, Bezos and the like crazy rich corporations. And so that, I think that's like a big part of these small producers. But it's definitely a challenge when you realize that the US market does expect things very fast, and when things run out, it's hard to like stay front of mind. So it's a constant kind of battle to stay like fixed in people's heads.
Yeah, I mean, that is like the biggest thing for South African wine producers. There was a really big issue with you know, Amazon coming to South Africa. It was a really huge thing because a lot of the independent producers, small batch from many industries, they actually had the huge issue of supply. Are they going to be able to supply their wines on this at the rate that, you know, the demand is? And demand is one thing, but rates of demand is also something that a lot of people completely neglect to think about. But yeah, I feel like we've been talking about supply and demand a lot. So I think we should move on to something a little bit more fun. Something that, you know, let's look at some of the 12 questions that were asked, some very curious people, and something a little bit interesting. I know you've probably had a lot of pinotage, and you know, South Africa is the cornerstone of pinotage, the creators of it. What are your thoughts on, you know, some people in South Africa, we like to chill it. I know you've had producers like Angus Paul. He does make a really nice, some really light style pinotages. There's some people that's also producing it in a very light red style, almost like a very light Grenache or a very light Pinot Noir style. It's almost similar to that. What are your thoughts on a very nice chilled pinotage made in that style?
I'm all about it. I
Mm-hmm.
think I when I decided to launch Culture Wine Company, I there was a bottle of Scions of Sinai Atlanticus Pinotage that kind of pushed me over the edge, and I think that's exactly the style you're talking about.
Yes.
12% alcohol. It's all
Uh-huh.
stainless steel. It's like refreshing and light, and I've had almost every wine buyer here in the U.S. that I've presented the wine to.
Mm-hmm.
um, they've said Beaujolais. Like every one of them's been like, oh my God, this is like drinking a Beaujolais cru. And I can see this like kind of sweet, sour tanginess to it. And I am all
Mm-hmm.
about it with a little chill.
That is absolutely great. I think the biggest compliment you could have given any South African producer is just to say that you've got the quality of some of the most loved red wines in the world. And if South Africa had that, if we had you like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, Pinotage would have probably been the world's next, greatest grape. We would have been the next Chardonnay. We would have been the next, I don't know, Chenin. I still think South African Chenin is the best in the world, but let me not say
Definitely.
that on the internet. Um,
You're right.
yes, I think the two of us are biased. I don't think we should be giving those opinions. But yeah, I know that we've spoken a little bit about, your favorite growing areas of South Africa. We have a lot of underrated varietals that grow here. They don't originate here, but they do grow here, like the Chenin Blanc, the Cabernet Sauvignon. What would you say is our most underrated varietals that you're particularly interested in, that we make that's quite unique?
Yeah, I mean, Pinotage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, well, I don't see any reason to go beyond that. Like, it's a varietal that like, I think here in the US, especially, there's like an old guard that has been around that is expecting Pinotage at high alcohol, a lot of oak. You know the story, right?
Yeah.
And then I think there's younger producers like Bernard and several others that are like, let's take this in the direction of picking early, low alcohol, refreshing, floral, right? And I think that is changing. That to me is like the story of South Africa. It's like it's a changing of the guard. These younger producers are they're the ones who are about to take over the industry, and they're taking this grape varietal in the direction it's ever gone in. And it's like by far the best it's ever been. And to me, that's like so much of the story of South Africa is like capsulated in Pinotage. And I'm so stoked to see reactions, because for me, it was like, instead of trying to go to the old guard and presenting them with this new style of Pinotage, let's get younger people into South Africa and get them excited by it. And this is how we're going to do it. And I think, to me, that's the grape that has all the potential. It's like the kind of indigenous grape of South Africa, right? It's so tied to the country. It's unique, it's fun, it's super food friendly. Like, I've been drinking it constantly with all these different foods, and like, wow, this works with red sauce and tomatoes. It works with the braai. It works with so many different foods. And so that's another element of like how people start to drink it. So yeah, I think Pinotage for me is the varietal that's underrated and exciting, and I think has so much potential.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, I don't think that because it's so readily available, it grows in our climate. It's so well suited. It was technically engineered for South Africa, and I feel like a lot of people, they really take advantage of the fact that we have such an untapped, like we have an insane supply of it, from budget to premium, and it expresses itself so differently depending on how it's treated. It's a very, very, very expressive grape, but a lot of people are doing some really wild things with it in ways that are so untraditional. And it's really, I feel like once we moved out of that monotonous traditional way of making the pinotage, South Africa's sort of profile on the wine skyrocketed. And I feel like this is actually the new wave of winemaking, is just steering away from the traditional way of making wine, not just pinotage, but just wine in general.
For sure, for sure. And I think, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's this young generation. I think that's what attracted me to South Africa to begin with, is it felt like when I was there, I ended up at Good Juice Wine Fair that, Hardy, Mac, and Matthew from Leo's put on, and met a lot of the producers that I work with today and represent. And I was just like so blown away by how young and energetic the industry was. And I think that's a big part of why you're seeing like experimentation, and I think things changing for the better, right? And I think, again, Pinotage is such a great example of that.
I think I have. I think we've lost Andrew.
I am
Have we
still
lost?
here.
Okay, there we go. You just went silent for like 2 seconds, and I'm like, did we lose you? Oh, yeah, I told you it's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But I mean, another question was, how do you plan on pushing these independent producers, these artisans, into forward in the market? Because I mean, now you have this huge cloud of, the market has their favorite wine, and it's really difficult to steer them in a new direction or to get people to try new wines. I think what I've been doing on this side is blind tastings that I've been hosting. But I'm very curious, how would you do that? Because it's not necessarily very easy to do blind tasting for the entire country. So I would imagine it's a little bit more difficult for you to gather people and, get them to drink this wine or even try it or pick that over their favorite wine that comes from literally anywhere else. So how do you push that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it in two different ways. One is to the consumer through the website, and the other is from the wholesale side. And I'm the only employee of my business. So I'm the one going out to the restaurants and the retailers, trying to get appointments. And, um, I'm not sure if it's the same as in South Africa, but here, there's so many wholesalers that buyers, sommeliers, et cetera, like they don't want me to just show up with bottles of wine and be like, hey, can I, take 20 minutes of your time? You got to find an email, set up an appointment, bring the wine. And, that takes a lot of time. Just to even get their attention, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of cold calling and like a lot of no's before you get yeses. But I think
Yeah.
what I've seen so far is again, only 2 months of the wine being here, I've seen interest from the trade far beyond what I expected. And that's like an incredibly promising sign. I think there's a lot of different parts to it, but first it's like to get their attention is one thing. The wines need to be really good. That's another. The pricing is important. There's a lot of elements to like getting people to buy the wine, but the amount of attention from really high quality restaurants and retailers has been incredibly promising. So I think it's really showing me that, I strongly believe in the quality and what's happening and obviously like put everything behind it. But I think I'm one person, and to see a lot of really good people show the same interest is I think really promising for where the country is. And like, I believe the quality is exceptional, and I think you're seeing like people kind of confirm that. Um, so yeah, it's been really good. I've actually realized that I need to focus even more on the wholesale side, and get more of the trade involved. And so, once the new year turns, I'm going to be sending a lot more of those cold call emails, trying to get more restaurants that I want to work with involved in the wines.
Oh, that's absolutely, you like our very own ambassador. So
Hmm.
yeah, we really, I must say, like, I can't speak on behalf of every single producer out here in South Africa, but I can say that for all of the small batch, independent producers that I've worked with here, people are super glad and grateful that somebody took the initiative to go out and say, like, here, South Africa is actually the greatest thing you will have on your shelf. And because I mean, it's really difficult for us to do that because South Africans go in a little bit too hard and strong with certain things. I know that we very enthusiastic about what we do. So I think to have someone like yourself that's from California, you know the industry, you know how the industry works there, the laws and everything. So it would be so much easier for you to just bring in a whole bunch of little bits instead of one person sending everything out on their own, because then they'd be on their own in the market. So yeah, it's such a great thing that you're doing over there. And the very final question is, how do you see South African pinotage, not particularly pinotage, but the wine? How do you see us performing in the US? And let's just say the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's your time, honestly.
Mhm.
I think there's been a lot of like elements of growth in terms of like we've already talked about the quality, the young people that are taking over the industry. I think there's been a ton of learning about how to work with some of these old vines, where to plant vines that like what's working in the best regions and sub-regions and different soils. And so I think like all of that learning has brought South Africa to this point where now like the quality across the board is really high. And so now you just need to get people to like share it with buyers, right, in different markets. And so I really think in the next couple of years, you'll see South Africa hit a serious, like a level it hasn't hit yet, and where it's like very much deserved to be. And I think that there's plenty of great importers already here bringing some really amazing wines. Hopefully, you know, Culture Wine Co. can be a part of also like uplifting and telling that story. But yeah, I don't see any reason why there's not a pretty serious like consumer kind of interest in South Africa, South African wine. And I think just so many different elements of what's happened there. And even like there's even direct flights there from Atlanta, right? So I think there's like all these different pieces kind of playing into part of like getting tourists there, getting people interested. And yeah, I think the next couple of years are going to be really great for South Africa. And for me, it's like, how do you make, if it is as good as I think it can be, it's like, how do you make it not a flash in the pan and make it so consumers are still thinking about it 5 years from now, 10 years from now? It's not just like a little trend that goes away. For me, it's like, make it sustainable. And I think all the like pieces are in place for that to happen.
Oh, that's amazing. And thank you so much, Peter, for coming on here and telling us your company's story. And also thank you for being such a pioneer for South Africa's wine industry up in the US. You know, it's been such a great time talking to you. And thank you to everybody who joined today to listen in on us chat about this. And yeah, I definitely am going to take you up on the offer on meeting up in California very soon.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually just found out I'll be in South Africa in March for a couple of weeks. So we'll have to catch up.
That's absolutely great. So we might also be doing a co-host tasting if you would really be down to do that. So then everyone who's been on here today can maybe meet you in person as well to have more of their 10,000 questions that they send through to ask you in person. That would also be really great.
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, hopefully we chat soon. We'll have some more of these lives with you as, you know, the industry grows up in the US. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm always down. Let me know.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to everyone that's watching.
Bye.
Bye.